بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. We'll just wait for a few minutes for everyone to clear out, inshallah. قال الإمام النووي رحمه الله تعالى: وعن أبي يزيد معن ابن يزيد بن الأقنص رضي الله تعالى عنهم، وهو أبوه وجده صحابيون، قال: كان أبي يزيد أخرج دنانير يتصدق بها، فوضعها عند رجل في المسجد، فجئت فأخذتها فأتيته بها، فقال: والله ما إياك أردت، فخاصمته إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، فقال: لك ما نويت يا يزيد، ولك ما أخذت يا معن. رواه البخاري. We are on the fifth hadith of the chapter of sincerity and ensuring that our intentions are present in all of our actions. And in this hadith, we have a story of a man giving sadaqah and leaving that sadaqah in the masjid for a certain poor person to come and take that sadaqah. But without him knowing, the person who came and took that sadaqah was none other than his son. So they took it to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that there's nothing wrong with this. You intended to give sadaqah, you've received your reward. And on the other hand, you are poor, you're eligible to take this, you may take this charity. The hadith translates, it's been narrated from Abu Yazid. Abu Yazid is a nickname, it's a kunya, which we've discussed before. His actual name is Ma'an. Ma'an, the son of Yazid, the son of Al-Akhnas. And Imam Nawawi tells us what's special about this family. He says, وَهُوَ, this person Ma'an, وَأَبُوهُ, his father, who is Yazid, وَجَدُّهُ, and his grandfather Al-Akhnas, all of them are Sahaba. They're all companions of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said, Ma'an said, كَانَ أَبِي يَزِيدُ, my father Yazid, أَخْرَجَ دَنَانِير, he took out some gold coins. Dinar refers to a gold coin, and dirham refers to a silver coin. يَتَصَدَّقُ بِهَا, with what intention? To give them in charity. Back in that day, if you wanted to give money in charity, or your gold coins and your silver coins in charity, one of the ways to do this was to leave it with a brother in the masjid. So you're making a wakil, you're appointing him as an agent. When someone comes by who is poor, he will give them that gold coin. So he left it with فَوَضَعَهَا عِنْدَ رَجُلٍ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ, he left it with a person in the masjid to give to any poor person that comes in. Now he left, the father left. فَجِئْتُ, the son says, Ma'an says, so I came inside, and I was in need of money at that time. فَأَخَذْتُهَا, so I took that money. فَأَتَيْتُهُ بِهَا, and then it so happened when I got home, I brought that money with me, and I ran into my father. And I told my father, well, there were some gold coins, someone had given them for the poor at the masjid, so I received these gold coins. His father says, فَقَالَ, he said, وَاللَّهِ مَا إِيَّاكَ أَرَدْت, I wasn't intending you. Like, don't think I wanted to spend this gold coin on any poor person. It wasn't specifically you, my family member, or someone who's close to me. So they went to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, because the father is saying, I intended it for any poor person, you shouldn't have received them. Whereas the son is saying, well, I got them from the masjid. They go to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, لَكَ مَا نَوَيْتَ يَا Yazid, that, O Yazid, you will receive what you intended. Meaning you intended to give this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَكَ مَا أَخَذْتَ يَا مَعَنْ, and O Ma'an, you can take what you've taken, it's for you. And this narration is mentioned by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Now there's a long discussion over here that if you were to give your zakat to someone who was not entitled to it, he's not eligible to receive your zakat, but you didn't know at that time, and later on it came to your attention that that person was not eligible to receive that zakat, what's the ruling? Right? And again, there's a fiqh discussion over here where the Hanafiya, or Abu Hanifa and his student, Imam Muhammad, I believe they differ with their Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah. But that's beside the point. The purpose I want to extract from this hadith is the importance of doing our due diligence when giving zakat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us and given us certain obligations which hold a lot of importance. And from these obligations is that of zakat. Unfortunately, nowadays we've lost the will, we've lost the spirit of zakat. What do? Whenever that time comes around every single year, or perhaps it's unfortunate, but many of us have forgotten how zakat works. So whenever that time comes around every single year, we take our money and we leave it with some organization and we believe our job is done. In this hadith, we understand that the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, they were very careful. That when this happened, his father Yazid did not just stay put. He came to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he asked the Prophet, he mentioned the whole scenario to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And when the Prophet heard the whole scenario, then he gave the verdict that it's fine. But unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation where if we are giving zakat, we are very lenient. We don't ever look into the details of where our zakat is going. And this is very problematic. Likewise, when you put sadaqah or we give charity anywhere, sometimes you don't look into how that charity is being used, right? And again, we don't question anyone, but it's important for us, especially in matters of zakat, especially for something which is an obligation upon us, that we do our due diligence and we ensure our zakat is given to the recipients. Why do I say this? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَبِنِ السَّبِيلِ. That zakat isn't just for anyone. Zakat isn't for any random person that you go out in the street, you think, you know what, this brother over here, I see him walking, I can give him my money. It's not like that. Zakat has certain recipients. Your zakat must reach one of those 8 recipients. If it does not reach one of those 8 recipients, then the zakat will not be fulfilled. Now, one of these recipients is the poor. How is poor defined? Well, maybe someone who does not have the nisab, the amount on which zakat is necessary. But then aside from that, there are other factors to look into as well. What about the other 7 recipients? Do they fulfill the category? Is the law still applicable in those areas? So we have to ensure that when we give zakat, number one, we study zakat. We don't just give it randomly. And number 2, we know how we are giving our zakat. And on this point, there's a book which everyone should purchase. It's called Zakat Made Easy. Zakat Made Easy, written by Sheikh Faraz Adam. Right? It's in English. It's not that long. It's like this small. And he discusses the importance of zakat. He discusses how to give zakat if you have stocks, for instance, if you've invested somewhere, if you have shares in a company. It's such a different scenarios where you'd have to give zakat, but you wouldn't realize unless you've studied the topic. So we have to ensure that we read into this and that we discuss our situation with our scholars, and so we know where to give zakat and how much zakat to give. Number 1. Number 2, I'll just discuss very briefly what is zakat, what is sadaqah, and what is lillah. Because oftentimes when you walk into the masajid, we see a sadaqah box. Sadaqah means charity. We see a box, and on that box we see zakat. Sometimes we see sadaqah, and sometimes we see like what, lillah, or like masjid, or like help the poor. Different names, right? But many times we think it's whatever, it doesn't make a difference, but it does make a difference exactly where our money is going. Zakah literally means to bless, to give blessing. And that's why when a person gives their money in zakah, as a result, their money will increase because blessing will enter into that money. Because they're giving away the filth of that money, and then as a result from that, they receive the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the money and your zakat increases. When you reach a certain amount of money in your life, meaning in your savings, aside from your home, aside from your car, aside from daily needs, you have a certain amount of assets which reach up to either the gold nisab or the silver nisab. What is a nisab? A nisab is that bar or that amount which has been set for zakat to become obligatory upon a person. So you reach this certain level. And after reaching that certain level, a year from that time, you still have that amount of money. Then zakat will be obligatory upon you, that you have to give 2.5% of that amount, however much money you have at the end of that year, in zakat. Again, the condition is for it to reach the nisab at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, it should still be above that bar, above that limit that was set. And I've told you that there's a silver nisab, and there's a gold nisab. The gold nisab is much more, it's much higher, somewhere in the thousands. The silver nisab, you can check it online, is most likely somewhere around $500, $600. right? So all of us should be giving zakat. And the beauty behind this is you might think, well, if I have $500, $600 in my bank, I'm not that rich, am I? But the purpose of zakat is what's more beneficial for the poor people. And we have to understand that us living in this country, even if we might not have that much, but compared to our brothers who are suffering and compared to our brothers who don't have any food, in fact, even in this country, compared to certain people who don't have enough to get through their daily lives, we have more than enough. And we should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. And one of the best ways to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through the money we have. We give it in charity. Zakat must be given to 8 certain recipients. And I mentioned one example, the poor people. And I said that a person who is poor is defined by not having enough money to reach that bare minimum, which was the nisab, the bar we set for zakat, which is either through silver or through gold. And likewise, there are 7 other recipients who receive zakat. And again, if you want more detail on this, you can open Ma'arif al-Quran, which is a tafsir, and you can go under the verse, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا. There's a good amount of detail regarding this verse in that tafsir, as well as other tafasir. Aside from zakat, we also have something called sadaqah wajibah. Sadaqah wajibah. Now, what does sadaqah mean? Sadaqah, the word literally means to be truthful. And when we give charity, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions in the hadith, and we'll come across it in Riyādh, inshallah, was sadaqatu burhan. The charity you give, it's a proof. What is it a proof? It's a decisive proof. Not just any proof, it's a decisive proof. What is it a proof of? Sadaqah tells if a person is true in his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because out of the many things we have, the greatest thing we are greedy for and something we like to keep with ourselves, and we like to have more and more of, it's money. Right? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, لو كان لابن آدم واديا من ذهب لا أحب أن يكون له واديان. That if the son of Adam had one valley filled of gold, a full valley filled of gold, he would love that he had another. وَلَنْ يَمْلَأَ فَاهُ إِلَّا التُّرَابِ. The only thing that will fill his mouth, the only thing that will content him is when he enters his grave and he enters into the dust. That's all. So the human being is greedy and he wants to keep money, he wants to safeguard money, and he wants to store his money. When a person takes that money and he gives it in sadaqah, this is a proof that he is true in his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But remember, when we give sadaqah, our purpose behind sadaqah is not to show others. Because who will our reward be with them? Our reward will be with them. Our purpose behind sadaqah should be to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the hadith mentions that from the 7 people who are under the shade of Allah on the day of judgment, one of them will be that person who gives sadaqah from his right hand, such that his left hand doesn't even notice. What does this refer to? What does it mean? One of the interpretations of this is he gives sadaqah so freely, he gives sadaqah in such a manner where the person sitting right behind him, right beside him, he doesn't even realize he gives sadaqah. So we make a habit, especially in Ramadan, in fact, especially in Sha'ban, because Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when Jibreel would meet him, he would be even more generous than a fast wind. If anyone walks outside in a day of a storm or when there's a fast wind, the wind reaches everything. It doesn't matter whether you're wearing a coat. It doesn't matter whether you turn around. The wind still hits you. The wind still reaches you. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in these months, he was more generous than a fast wind. So we ensure that we give sadaqah, and we give sadaqah in a good amount. Again, if a person doesn't have that much, if a person does not have that much, at least from the amount they have, they should still be giving sadaqah. And even if it's a small amount, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless you in this. And we're going to come across more ahadith regarding this. It just slipped my mind. But there are many ahadith. ذهب أهل الدثور بالأجور. The poor companion said to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that these rich companions, they took all the rewards. Because aside from all the good deeds we can do and they can do, when it comes to giving sadaqah, they have the money, we don't. So you see the mentality and the approach and the ideology of the companions, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, may Allah be pleased with them, that in every single instance in their life, they were thinking, how can I spend in the path of Allah? How can I give for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So sadaqah means a charity, and I told you this is a proof upon a person's belief. Sadaqah wajibah, we all know a wajib means something which is compulsory or obligatory upon a person. What does sadaqah wajibah refer to? There are certain types of charities which become obligatory or they become binding upon a person. I'll give you an example. Let's assume someone had an exam and they make an oath that, Ya Allah, if I do good in this exam, I will give $100 in charity to so-and-so person or to so-and-so masjid. Now they took an oath. This is what we call in Islam nadhar. If they do good in that exam, this becomes sadaqah wajibah. They have to fulfill that charity. They have to ensure they give the charity in the area they took the oath for. Meaning if I said I'll give that certain person this $100, I have to give it to them. Understand? So This is one example of sadaqah wajibah. Another example is the kafara. What is kafara? Kafara is an expiation. If a person is fasting and he breaks his fast by intentionally drinking or eating or having intercourse, then he has to give kafara. And from the kafara that I mentioned, one of the kafara is a monetary expiation. So if need be, he'll have to give money, or he'll have to give food to the poor people, etc. He has to give that in kafara, in expiation of the fast he intentionally broke. This is another example of sadaqah wajibah. And then there's a few more examples. The reason I'm specifying sadaqah wajibah and zakat is so that we understand that these matters, zakat and sadaqah wajibah, they must be given to the right people. If they aren't given to the right people, if I take an oath, I'll pay that person, but I end up paying someone else, my oath is not complete. Likewise, if I give zakat to someone who's not poor, and I had a feeling he wasn't poor, I had a feeling he might not be eligible for zakat, and I still gave it to him, my zakat will not be complete. This is something important we have to keep in mind. Then we have sadaqah nafila. What is sadaqah nafila? Nafila means voluntary. And sadaqah nafila is normally when you read sadaqah on these boxes, that's what sadaqah nafila refers to. Meaning it's a voluntary charity. It's literally charity. This can be used for any means of good. Whether it's for people, whether it's for the masjid, whether it's for the poor people outside, it can be used for any means of good. Right? And aside from this, we have one more compartment. It's called lillah. What does lillah mean? Lillah literally means for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does it literally mean? For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in our general customs and norm, lillah is normally excluded and separate for the masjid. Meaning the money that goes into lillah, it's used for the masjid specifically. If this is understood amongst the people and someone puts their money in lillah, they're essentially saying, I'm only allowing you to use this money for the masjid. If this is understood amongst the people and someone puts their money in lillah, they're saying that this money can only be used for the masjid. If someone was to take that money and give it to a poor person, or if someone was to take that money and use it in another infrastructure, it would not be permissible. Because this is what we call waqf. You're taking this property of yours and you're giving it up for public usage, and you've added a condition that it must be used for the masjid. If this is the case, if this is a general norm, or let's assume, for instance, we have a box that says masjid maintenance, then it's important to make sure that that money is used for the masjid and the masjid alone, nothing else. These are important things we have to keep in mind. And once again, these matters, perhaps they don't fall on our shoulders as much. Perhaps they fall on the shoulders of the ones in charge, the authority, but we have to keep it in mind. I'll give you one more example. When we give zakat, I mentioned earlier that unfortunately nowadays, whenever we have to give zakat, we just go to an organization and we give it online. Number one, we should make sure that our zakat is reaching the eligible recipients. Because if it's not, it's our zakat that we missed out on, not someone else's. It's us who lost out on that amount we were giving in zakat. So we have to ensure that that zakat amount reaches the eligible recipients. Some organizations, when they take zakat money, they take a certain commission fee or a certain amount for themselves. Now, aside from the fiqh ruling, is this permissible or not, which scholars allow, which scholars don't allow it, the general opinion of majority of the scholars is that they shouldn't be doing this. But the reality is they do it. So we have to make sure when we give our money through organizations, if they have 100% zakat policy, then it's fine, because that means they're going to give 100% of what they receive in zakat. Or perhaps they don't have 100% zakat policy, but you confirm with them the amount they were taking zakat, you can just give that amount extra. And that way it'll make out for that amount which they're going to take, and the rest will be given in zakat. We have to ensure we do this because, again, this is our job. It's upon our shoulders. And the best thing a person can do is, instead of going through a public organization or a big masjid, if you have a friend back home and we know he understands these laws and he knows there are poor people who don't have money, they don't have food, they don't have a house, tell him, I'll send you the money. Can you please make sure you get this money to the poor people? Very simple. And this is perhaps one of the best manners we can do it in. Aside from doing it ourselves, again, may Allah forgive us, we've forgotten these practices of Islam. Moving on, we'll discuss the next hadith, inshallah. This is a bit lengthy. It's a lengthy hadith. We'll discuss it in parts. وعن أبي إسحاق سعد بن أبي وقاص. The Sahabi radiallahu ta'ala anhu did mention in this hadith, who the hadith is narrated from, is Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. And this name, it should ring a bell. Whenever we hear the Sahaba's name, there are certain Sahaba we should know about them right away. And I mentioned a book 2 weeks ago, Men and Women Around the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, the reason we mention all these books is for us to read. It's not because the name sounds nicer, I'm going to go home and think about it and then put it to the side afterwards. We have to ensure we bring something into our life out of this weekly program or out of a weekly reminder. We have to ensure throughout our day we are learning about Islam, we are learning about the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. May Allah be pleased with them. So Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, who is Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas? He's one of the earliest Sahaba companions to accept Islam. Very early on he accepted Islam. And he is someone very special because he's known as the first person to shoot an arrow in the path of Allah. And he was a warrior, he was very strong. And that's why in the battle of Uhud when he was fighting off the disbelievers, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was so pleased. He gave him a dua that may my parents be sacrificed for you. May my mother and father be sacrificed for you. This is a statement we use. I'm sure if everyone's heard, Fidaka abi wa ummi. Fidaka abi wa ummi. This means may my parents or may my mother and my father be sacrificed for you. Meaning you're doing so amazing. May Allah bless you and give you increase and more. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam made this dua for Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas. He was present in Badr and perhaps all the battles that came afterwards. And he's out of the 10 Sahaba who are promised paradise. There are 10 Sahaba, al-Ashratul Mubashshara, who are promised in one gathering paradise. Can anyone name these 10 Sahaba? Khadija. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala an. Think of the 4 Khalifas. Ali radiallahu ta'ala an. Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an. That's 4. We have 6 remaining. I told you one right now. Abdul Rahman bin Auf, that's 5. Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, that's 6. Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, that's 7. Sa'id bin Zayd, that's 8. We said Umar. We said Abu Bakr as well. So we're a bit rusty, right? This is why it's important for us to read and study the lives of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. These people, if it weren't for them, how would Islam reach the 4 corners of this globe? How would it happen? Allah used them to spread Islam. Imagine how close they must have been to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Ibn Mas'ud actually mentions that, I believe it's Ibn Mas'ud, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looked for the most purest of people. And amongst the most purest of people, he found the prophets. Not Bilal radiallahu ta'ala. Talha has mentioned already. These are 10 people who've been given the glad tidings of paradise in one gathering. Other than the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, all of them, Allah is pleased with them. And all of them will go to paradise. But these 10 are special because in one gathering, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, he is in Jannah, he is in Jannah, he is in Jannah. And he named all 10 of them. He listed all 10 of them. So, these Sahaba, they sacrificed everything they have for us. And this religion reached us through their sacrifice. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I was saying Ibn Mas'ud says that Allah looked into the people and the most purest were the prophets. And then after the prophets, he looked into the people and the most purest were the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And he chose them to be the companions of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is one of the reasons that the Shi'as, I'm digressing, but it's alright, the Shi'as, one of the reasons there's a big problem with their belief and their system and the way they work is because they look down upon the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. If you look down upon the very companions who served Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and who were with the Prophet throughout his life, and the people regarding whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, radiyallahu anhum wa radu an, that Allah is pleased with them and they're pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what can you say about yourself? These are the people who were the closest to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that's why it doesn't matter, no matter how many good deeds I do, how many good deeds you do, we will never reach the level of the Sahaba or even a single Sahabi. May Allah be pleased with all of them. So we have to study their lives. We have to study their lives. So these 10, inshallah, by next week, I'm hoping everyone will know them. Or by tonight, everyone will go home and search these 10. Who are these 10 Sahaba? And we'll look into their lives. Now, continuing on with Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, he was mustajab ad-da'wah. What does that mean? If you would make a dua, his dua would be accepted. And there's a famous story regarding this incident where someone had framed him. And he, in his old age, he made dua against that person. And every single dua he made was accepted. Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, he lived a long life. Keep this in mind. And he passed away in the year 55 or 58 after Hijrah. And after Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam migrated from Mecca to Medina, after that 55 or 58 years. Now we're going to move on with the hadith, inshallah. He mentions the whole lineage or a portion of the lineage of Sa'ad radiyallahu ta'ala an. وعن أبي إسحاق سعد بن أبي وقاص مالك بن أهيب بن عبد مناف بن زهرة بن كلاب بن مرة بن كعب بن لؤي القرشي الزهري رضي الله تعالى عنه أحد العشرة المشهود لهم بالجنة. One of those 10 for whom Jannah was mentioned, and it was testified that they are from the people of Jannah. Radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, may Allah be pleased with all of them. He says, جاءني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يعودني عام حجة الوداع or وداع. That Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam came to me to visit me in the year of the farewell pilgrimage, Hajjatul Wida', where the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, along with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they went to Hajj, they went to Makkah. And in this time, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, he got sick, and he got very sick. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he went to visit him. And this is also a lesson for us. Nowadays, our brothers are sick, our neighbors are sick, our friends are sick, but we hardly go to visit them. This is completely against the teachings of Islam. And one of the things COVID did when COVID hit was it severed this practice of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, right? Because everyone's social distancing. Well, I'm not saying go visit a brother who has COVID, but we have different sicknesses as well, right? If someone is sick, let's say they broke their leg, or they broke their arm, or they had to hurt themselves, or they got into a car crash, it's our duty as a Muslim to go and visit them. This is why the hadith mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on judgment day will say to the person, I got sick and you didn't come meet me. The person will say, Ya Allah, how did you get sick? You're the creator of everyone and everything. How could you possibly get sick? He said, my slave, my servant was sick. And had you come to meet him, you would meet me there. So the importance of visiting our Muslim brothers, and again, not just people we know, not just relatives, our Muslim brothers, anyone, that's sufficient. We have to meet them, we should talk to them, we should ensure that they're doing well. He was very sick. To the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself went, and he went to visit him. Imagine the president or prime minister coming and meeting you. This is how Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam made people feel. Everyone was loved by him, and everyone felt that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam loves me the most. Imagine a leader of a whole nation, and he comes specifically to meet you. Imagine the feeling the Sahaba had in their hearts. That's why he was so special, that despite being the greatest of people and the pinnacle of excellence, he would treat himself with so much, he would be so humble, that if he was walking, you wouldn't realize who's the leader and who's not. They all look the same. You know, we'll come across the hadith of Jibreel, inshallah. In the beginning of that hadith, Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, and he mentions that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam had a little stand which he would sit on. It was elevated a bit. And he says the reason for this was because when people would come in, they wouldn't be able to differentiate who's the Prophet and who's not the Prophet. So to ensure they could see that this is Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they gave him a little stand, and they built a little stand so he could sit on that. So you see how humble Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was. So he comes and he meets Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas min waj'in ishtadda bi, due to a sickness which is very severe. And in another narration he mentions, I was about to die, I felt like it was my last. فَقُلْتُ, I said, O Messenger of Allah, إِنِّي قَدْ بَلَغَ بِي مِنَ الْوَجْعِ مَا تَرَى. You can see how sick I am. وَأَنَا ذُو مَالٍ, I have a lot of wealth. وَلَا يَرِثُنِي إِلَّا ابْنَةٌ لِي, and I only have one daughter that will inherit this wealth. أَفَأَتَصَدَّقُ بِثُلُثَيْ مَالِي, can I give 2/3 of my wealth in sadaqah? Can I give 2/3 of my wealth in charity? When people pass away, or when they're in this last moment of their life, because they realize I have to go back, they say give everything in charity. And this is another point we'll touch on later, inshallah, that Islam has given us very strict commandments regarding inheritance. But unfortunately, we don't study them and we don't act upon them. And I'm going to touch on this after, inshallah. Can I give 2/3 of my wealth in charity? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said no. Qultu, I replied, فَالشَّطْرُ, what about half of my wealth in charity? O Messenger of Allah, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said no. Qultu, I said, فَالثُّلُث, what about 1/3? Ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of Allah, قال الثُّلُث, he said 1/3, وَالثُّلُثُ كَثِير, and even 1/3 is a lot. Or a different translation, 1/3, and don't think this is less, this is a lot, don't worry about it. And then he told him the reasoning behind this. إِنَّكَ أَن تَذَرَ وَرَثَتَكَ أَغْنِيَاءَ, indeed for you to leave your inheritors or your heirs أغنياء, in a state of goodness, in a state where they are rich, خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَن تَذَرَهُمْ عَالَةً يَتَكَفَّفُونَ النَّاسِ, it's better than for you to leave them poor where they're going around to people begging them for money. It's better that you give only 1/3 of your wealth in sadaqah, and the rest of it you have your inheritors take it, so that they won't go around after your death and begging for money. وَإِنَّكَ لَن تُنْفِقَ نَفَقَةً, and then he mentions something, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentions that don't think when you spend upon your family you are not giving money in charity. He says, إِنَّكَ لَن تُنْفِقَ نَفَقَةً, you don't spend a single expense. تَبْتَغِي بِهَا وَجْهَ اللَّهِ, through which you intend the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, illa ujrita alayha, except that you will be rewarded over it. Meaning even the money we spend upon our family, hatta ma taj'ala fi imra'atik, such that even what you put within the mouth of your spouse, even that morsel of food you give to your spouse, you will be rewarded over this. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, if you have the intention. If you have the intention that when I make money, when I go to work, it's because I want to provide for my family because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded me to do so. If you have the intention for anything which is genuinely permitted, sleeping at night, but I'm sleeping so I can wake up and worship Allah, and you truly mean it. Or spending money upon your relatives. Ya Allah, I see my relative is in a bad situation. I'm going to spend money upon him for you, even though I have to spend money upon him anyways, either due to my custom or because the Sharia has commanded me, but I'm spending it for you specifically. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for this. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, don't think spending money upon your family is something which is looked down upon, or it's not a charity. Do it with the right intention and with a good intention, it will count as a charity. Even the smallest thing will count as a charity. Now, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, again, he was a muhajir. What does a muhajir mean? He migrated from Mecca to Medina. And I mentioned a few weeks ago when we discussed the hadith regarding hijrah, that the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, when they left something for Allah, they wouldn't want to go back to it. Meaning this blessed land, Mecca, they left it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They didn't want to pass away in a manner where they were still in this land. They wanted to pass away in Medina or a different land. Now Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, he's sick. He's saying, Ya Nabi Allah, what if I pass away? Ya Rasulullah, ukhallafu ba'da ashabi, will I be left behind after my companions? Meaning either my companions will return to Medina, and because I'm sick, I'm going to be left here and I might pass away over here. Or perhaps they will return to Medina and I won't be able to return back with you. Like why, will I pass away over here? Will I stay in Mecca? Because again, the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, once they left something for Allah, they wouldn't want to go back to it. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, innaka lan tukhallaf, even if you remain, and let's say you live a long life. And by the way, this is actually a prophetic miracle where Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam indicated that he would live a long life. When did Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas pass away? Who remembers the year I mentioned earlier? 55 or 58 after Hijrah. When was the farewell pilgrimage? The Hajjatul Wada', in which he was sick over here. Which year was it in? This was the 10th year after Hijrah. So Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, despite being on his deathbed, he got better. And he lived a long life. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, perhaps if you were to live a long life, فَتَعْمَلَ عَمَلًا تَبْتَغِي بِهِ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ, you do any action through which you want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِلَّا ازْدَدْتَ بِهِ دَرَجَةً وَرِفْعَةً, you will only increase in status. And this is one of the benefits of living a long life. You can pray more salah, you can give more sadaqah, you can give more zakat, you can fast more. There is more chances to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So perhaps if you were to live a long life, you do good actions through which you intend to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with every good action your status will be raised. وَلَعَلَّكَ أَن تُخَلَّفْ, perhaps you will live a long life. Maybe you will live a long life, حَتَّى يَنْتَفِعَ بِكَ أَقْوَامٌ, until certain people draw benefit and they gain benefit through you. Meaning until the Muslims, they are benefited through you, وَيُضَرَّ بِكَ آخَرُونَ, and others are harmed through you, meaning the disbelievers, they are harmed through you. This was a foreshadowing of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which came to be because Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, after this point in his long life, he led many armies outside and he led many conquests. And he took over many lands where the Muslims were given power and the disbelievers, يُضَرَّ بِكَ آخَرُونَ, they were taken under Muslim command. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam lets him know that if you do these actions with a good intention, you will be rewarded. And then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because we're speaking about the hijrah and how the Sahaba, they loved that they would pass away in Medina and not in a land which they left, which they migrated from. He says, Allahumma amdi li ashabi hijratahum, that Ya Allah, complete for my companions their hijrah. Meaning they have left this land out of your love and only for you, and they left everything behind and they want to pass away in the land they went to. They don't want to come back over here. Ya Allah, complete their hijrah for them. وَلَا تَرُدَّهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَعْقَابِهِمْ, and don't send them back upon their heels from where they came. And then he says, لَكِنِ الْبَائِسُ سَعْدُ بْنُ خَوْلَةَ, but the pity is for Sa'ad bin Khawla. Sa'ad bin Khawla was a companion who perhaps after doing hijrah, one of the interpretations, he came back to Mecca and he happened to pass away in Mecca. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam yarthi lahu, he would show pity and he would show mercy for this companion of his, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, may Allah be pleased with them. Now this hadith, just again, the lessons we learn from this: number one, any action you do, if you do it with the intention of pleasing Allah, even if it's permitted, it will become an act of worship and you will be rewarded over it. Even the smallest thing, even spending time with your family or your wife, that will be something which is rewarded in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, provided you have the right intention. Number two, actions we do throughout our life which we have to do anyways. You go to work every single morning, you sleep every single night. These are things you have to do, you need them to function. If you do them with the right intention, they will be rewarded as well. And earlier on I mentioned regarding this, that this doesn't mean a sin will become halal because of the right intention. One shouldn't think if I have the right intention committing a sin, that I'm going to steal to spend on the poor, it does not become halal, it still remains a sin. And we also learn from this hadith that living a long life is not necessarily bad. Because if living a long life is spent in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is spent pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this will also be rewarded greatly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mentioned before that I will discuss regarding the laws of inheritance and the importance of inheritance. In this hadith, what did we learn about inheritance? Who remembers the topic or the discussion regarding inheritance? When Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came to me and he said that, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas said, I'm very sick, I'm not feeling well, and I think I might pass away. Can I give 2/3 of my wealth in sadaqah? What did the Prophet say? No. Can I give half in sadaqah? What did he say? No. What amount was allowed to be given in sadaqah? 1/3. And this is a very important rule of Islam. When a person passes away, they want to give everything they have in sadaqah. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says no. As Muslims, do we own our wealth? Well, we do own our wealth, but we have to understand at the end of the day, all of this wealth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything we have, everything we've accumulated in this world, who does it belong to? It belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we do with our wealth whatever makes Allah happy. We give zakah because that makes Allah happy. We give sadaqah because that makes Allah happy. And when we pass away, this wealth which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had lended us, it's not our wealth. It does not come to us to our graves. It does not come with us, to our graves. Who does it go to? It goes to the heirs, the inheritors. And this is where the science of mirath, inheritance, or the science of fara'id. What does fara'id mean? Fara'id literally means the portions which are allocated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. Meaning, when it comes to this matter, it is so serious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran has revealed verses that when a person passes away, his father will receive this much of his inheritance. His son will receive this much. The daughter will receive this much. If the daughter is with the brother, she'll receive this much. Everything is allocated in the Quran. Everyone's been given and assigned their portions. But it's truly sad that we see in our communities and in general, when a person passes away, perhaps one sibling or one son or one family member takes everyone's portions and they give it out as they will, as if they're playing God on earth. This is a big sin, and this money will be haram upon that person, and he's eating haram. And you can imagine he's only filling his tummy up with the fire of the hellfire. That's all he is doing. But unfortunately, when a person passes away, greed overtakes us. Or sometimes it's not greed. Sometimes it's an emotional feeling that my father owned this property, I don't want him to sell it off, I'm going to take it myself. Regardless, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Sharia has given us certain portions which we have to abide by and certain rules which we have to fulfill. And from them is this rule that you can't give sadaqah, you can't give in charity more than 1/3 of your wealth. If you want to give in charity, you can give up to 1/3. Anything more than that is not permitted, number one. Number two, you can't write in your will that I want to give someone who's already receiving inheritance more. For instance, if the wife is entitled to 1/8 upon the demise of the husband can't say, I want to write that she receives more, because she's already receiving inheritance, unless all the other parties who are receiving agree with this. If everyone agrees with this, and not forcefully, not that it's fine, right, don't worry about it, I'll give you some mitai afterwards. No, everyone needs to, from the bottom of their heart, agree with this. If that happens, if that's the case, you can't force your sister because she's weak, or force your mother, or force another family member because they won't say anything. It's not permitted, and that money will be haram for you, and you're eating someone else's wealth, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask you regarding this on the Day of Judgment. This is something which we see a lot of weakness and a lot of, unfortunately, no one really acts upon it in our time. Even though Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam has given us a very specific procedure. And that's why in the courses we have in the alim class course, and it's even in ifta, when you're studying how to be a mufti, one of the most important thing is to be able to give out the correct amount of shares. If anyone is to pass away, they should immediately get all their assets and everything that person had, how much of it will be given to their family. They should ask a scholar, they should discuss with a scholar, and each amount should be given as deserved to each family member who deserves. If someone is not entitled to a share, they shouldn't receive any, right? If in the presence of the son, the brother is there, the brother does not receive a share. We don't break the Islamic law and say, you know what, he's a good person, unless the person who passed away wrote in his inheritance that I want to give him this amount. And any will that's written, the other law is that it has to be fulfilled from 1/3. You can't use more than 1/3 in fulfilling the will. Meaning, for instance, if someone writes in his will that I didn't perform my hajj, I want someone to perform a hajj upon my behalf, the hajj needs to be performed within 1/3 of the assets or the amount, the estate he leaves behind. You can't use more than 1/3, again, unless you take permission from all receiving heirs. That's a different matter. But the reason I'm focusing on this is because this is something which we lack in our community. And likewise, the rules of wasiyah. What is wasiyah? Writing wills. This is very emphasized in the Islamic, in Hadīth, prophetic narrations, and in the Islamic tradition. But we've forgotten about it nowadays because of our ignorance of Islamic law. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, and may give us the ability to act upon what we have learned. The month of Ramadan is very close. We ask Allah to allow us to reach the month of Ramadan, and we want to make sure that just as we increase our recitation of the Quran, we also increase our personal connection with the Quran. It's not sufficient that we recite and we come for Taraweeh and we make dua, the Hafiz is reading too slow, you should read faster. It's not appropriate and it's not sufficient. We have to make sure this is the month of connecting to the Quran, not just telling people read faster, and hopefully when looking at the time when's the Tarawih going to finish, or looking what's the fastest Tarawih in the area so I can go to that one. This is not appropriate and it's not respectful. So we make a habit that we're going to recite Quran every single day, and we read about the Quran, whether it's a tafsir, whether it's a translation, whether it's sitting in a lecture, whatever it may be, but we create a connection with the Quran, and inshallah, after this month we come out a changed person, and throughout this month we refrain from sin, and we refrain from anything that displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.